Hi, Justin. Thank you so much for helping my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm a second-year law student at the University of Pittsburgh, where I'm studying international law, particularly international commercial law. And I'm also an intern for the Space Court Foundation, which is a nonprofit space law research firm. While there, I've been working on export controls, and we're about to start on an arbitration.
Um, what got you into law?
It was a lot of things. So I had been in the Army before this and decided like it was time. I wanted to try something new in life. And law seemed like a natural way to like continue to advocate for people, which is what I was doing in the military. But what was interesting to me was while I was just Googling around one day, seeing like, well, what aspect do I be interested in? That's when I discovered space law, which, was a field I had no idea existed. And I'd always been interested in space back from when I was a kid, had the telescope and everything. And then, I realized that this was a real growing field. There was a lot of interesting things going on and a lot of small aspects that, we kind of overlook. And things have kind of snowballed since then. This weekend, I'm actually going to be a delegate to a United Nations convention with 120 other young professionals like me, all about like, okay, how to space exploration for the future. What's that look like? So yeah, it's been an exciting ride so far.
Well, maybe to get you a jump start on that and jumping ahead to questions, what does it look like?
Exciting, for one. Like that's the biggest thing is there's a lot of interest, not just like in the academic community, but also in the business community, which is good because you need the money to get out there. So the up until this point, space exploration has been driven largely by government agencies, and funded on the idea of first it was defense, and then it was, okay, well, we can do some scientific discovery. But now we've discovered enough to realize that there are some real commercial applications out there, that for satellites and communication, but also for commercial development of celestial bodies. That's the new hot thing. So yeah, there's a interest in both the public and private sector. So things have really taken off. The industry's grown about 500% over the last 5 years as far as number of people employed, and shows no signs of slowing down. Even when we had the recession in 2020, it still maintained very strong hiring and very strong pay. So yeah, it's a very exciting time in the field.
I often, well, I kind of graduated in the middle of the dot-com boom from high school. And so I got to see the whole internet boom. And I think the 2020 is going to be for that, for space, what the 1990s were for the internet. And I was wondering if this is in line with your thinking or?
Yeah, so I hope it ends better, that we don't have that massive crash at the end of it. But I don't think that's likely. We've seen the market kind of correct go in the last about 6 months or so. But I would say, yeah, there are some parallels, especially with regards to developing new technologies. And if you're the person who figures out, like, who could patent something new, a new drive engine, stuff like that, new materials, you're going to be numero uno for a number of governments, corporations, and so innovation can happen very quickly in this field. The capital's there, the interest is there, and the actual guys who are developing the technologies and coming up with the good ideas, they're going to get rewarded. So yeah, I definitely some parallels there.
I wanted to ask you about your interest in study of international law. It seems that we kind of went through a golden age of having a rules-based system,
Mhm.
and are sort of now moving into kind of like a more traditional system of a more how do we say, stronger players getting to do what they want, and lure smaller players just having to fend for themselves. I was wondering if you see that same transition, or if you see some hope that maybe I'm missing.
Well, I think so. I would say there's some unwarranted nostalgia in that idea. There was a brief golden period, I would say, like in the early 90s, like once the Berlin Wall came down and we thought, conflict is over, the end of history and all that. Obviously, it wasn't true. But from the re-establishment of the New World Order in the 1940s, post-World War II, you still had the United States and the Soviet Union very much flexing their muscles on smaller countries. You still had colonialism. So we are not where I think we're not where we would like to be. We would like to have a full rules-based order where even the smallest among us have equal voice. But I'm not willing to say it's regression so much as a recognition of the unfairness of the situation. And I think that recognition is important because once you recognize the problem, well, then you can start to deal with it. You can, strive to develop a more fair and equitable international order. So like when you say like, have things gotten worse? I don't think things have gotten worse. I think people have realized how bad they are. And but that's honestly a good thing because it allows us to make them better.
And when we talk about like the moon and kind of harvesting resources there and making developments there, I mean, you could see kind of the US and China and Russia and Europe and India and Japan all having like a strong interest in coming up with something that's workable. And because they're all going to be players there. But then you have like other countries who have no space programs, but maybe they don't want to completely foreclose on a future of having one. How do you make that balance between people who can do it today and those who might want to keep that option open for the future?
That's actually a fantastic question. And it's one of the issues that I'm personally researching right now. So I'm really glad you asked. So there's really two things there. There's one is it links into your comments about the international structure and that the power players locking others out, and recognizing that that's not the way to do things. So there was previously the Moon Treaty, which I'm sure you've heard about at some point, that a lot of large countries like the United States refused to sign because it would have made the moon open to everyone. And we said, no, we want to get our slice of the pie. Now, that by not signing that treaty, we're open to developing a different framework that would allow access, but at the same time preserves, some sovereignty for the players who can actually afford to get out there. So it's something that we need to pay attention to not lock those guys out economically, over the next 30 to 50 years as we develop. Since we recognize that that's a problem and that's not how we want to run things, that's step one. Like we can develop an equitable trade agreement. The other side of that is, how do they get access now to those resources? And so there's been a couple of proposed frameworks to allow smaller countries to piggyback off of larger countries' programs or to develop their own private industry. But there are significant civil law hurdles, in coming up with agreements on, funding for those missions. The best I could say right now is that it's recognized as an issue since about 2012. UNIDWA, this Institute for the Unification of Private Law, made some proposals about how that can be done to allow smaller countries and smaller companies access to those resources. But it kind of stalled because a lot of the people who would normally push it said, much like the United States with the Moon Treaty, no, we have the power. We don't want to share that power. So this is one of those ways where I say that the field is growing. It's immature. It needs more time to develop because right now, yeah, if those smaller countries and companies would be locked out of the market if we started closing everything down right now. So it's absolutely an issue, but it is one that we have recognized and are engaging with. At this time, though, it's not where we need to be.
I guess, whenever you have like a bigger party kind of engaging a smaller party, it's really easy for it to be like the smaller party is more of like a fig leaf or a vassal state of the bigger party, maybe to get some votes in like the UN or something like that. What can be done to actually kind of have those smaller parties enabled as being like full partners?
So this is a question that a number of countries have had to grapple with, and some of them come up with very successful models. I'm thinking in particular the examples of South Korea and Taiwan. Taiwan very much dependent on the United States for its physical security, and recognizing that it had to provide some value to the global stage in order to maintain that security, it focused on microchip production. And now the vast majority of the chips that are produced in the world come from Taiwan or are based on designs out of Taiwan. And in doing so, they gave the United States and the rest of the world a vested interest in maintaining that sovereignty so that they're not overcome by an outside power. South Korea is similar. They developed a very strong, more broad range tech industry. We have Samsung, Hyundai cars, so they found a way to focus on select industries that provided value to those power players. And in doing so, demonstrated that they're worth being treated as an equal partner. So when we see a similar thing in space, smaller countries and smaller companies, they might focus on like one or two things. They might only make an engine or a small thruster, but because they make the best thruster and they own the patent to that thruster, you've got to treat them as an equal. So there's definitely some skill and diplomacy that takes place, but it's absolutely possible for the smaller player to maintain their integrity, their autonomy, and still be treated as an equal.
Well, I wanted to ask you some questions about the moon. Did you know that NASA's planning to send astronauts back to the moon?
Oh yes, and I'm so excited.
How did you find out?
Honestly, I found out pretty much when they announced it. Like I've always been a big fan of the space program, and I followed NASA's Twitter back when I had a Twitter. And so when they announced the Artemis program, I was like, all right, now we're talking. Like, okay, we're especially for me. Like with a bit of a historical mythological bent, we had the Apollo program, we're going to go out there, we're exploring this knowledge. And now it's like, no, we're Artemis, like we're hunting now. We know exactly what we're doing and we're going, so so as soon as the announcement was made, I was like, all right, I'm on board. Let's do it.
Do your family and friends know?
Yeah, I would say probably because I told them. Like it was an exciting thing for me. So I was like, guys, we're going back to the moon. Woo! Yeah.
Most of the people that I talk to randomly, like at Starbucks in the street, have no clue that we're going to the moon.
Really?
In fact, I interviewed a jogger yesterday, right across from the Johnson Space Center, and she didn't know.
That's especially like where you're located. Like I'm genuinely shocked by that. But okay, I mean, got to get the word out. All right, build the excitement.
It might be an interesting social experiment for you to ask 5 random people. I don't know how you work it into the conversation in a smoother way, but you might be surprised by the answers you get.
You know what? I'm getting ready for class right now. You can probably see like the room behind me. So yeah, you know what? I'll just ask. I got 15 people in there. Who knows? We're going to the moon, guys. Like,
Exactly.
yeah.
Would you take a trip to space if you could?
Oh, absolutely, in a heartbeat.
Like how far would you go? Would you just go to orbit, to the moon? Would you immigrate to Mars?
I wouldn't. So right now, I'm not immigrating to Mars. Like that's a step. We still got some work to do to get there. That's why I'm excited about the upcoming moon mission, because you never know you needed to discover something until you discover it. We always thought asteroids, they're rocks and iron, like we know what we're expecting. And then the first time we go to touch one, it turns out it's spongy and our spacecraft bounces off. That's not something you would ever expect. So there's a lot to learn. So not going out to live on Mars just yet, but take a little jog around the moon, maybe take a quick hop on Mars. Like absolutely, I'm down for that.
Now, just out of curiosity, based upon kind of like your optimistic view of the future, how far in the future do you think that's really something you have to say no to?
I think that within the next 30 to 50 years, we will have a stable space infrastructure, at least between Earth and the moon. As I'm sure you're aware, the moon is the moon's surface is composed very much like Earth. Like there's a lot of the same materials and minerals. So like there's incentive to conduct serious commercial development for resource extraction there. So I think that's going to incentivize, long-term habitation on the moon, at least for people, individuals, it varies. Like you got to talk to biologists about like radiation and whatnot. So I think 30 to 50 years, you could probably live on the moon for an extended period of time. Mars is a different story. Mars is a challenge. It's a big one. I think that one's probably going to take longer than people realize. As optimistic as I am, I think that that's probably 50 to 100 years at best. I think that's a lot further off than people are either willing to admit or able to recognize. I hope to be wrong, but on that one, I'm a realist.
It's really funny, technology either develops at a rate that's just unimaginable or it seems to stall out. Like our washer and dryer technology for clothes seems to have peaked in like 30 years ago and hasn't really changed much.
You're exactly right there. But there are also some things require solutions that are just so complex and so difficult that other things need to happen first before we can get there. And I think that's probably what the problem with Mars is going to be. The even basic stuff like the fact that the soil chemistry is poisonous and it gets everywhere because it's never had like erosion. That's a huge challenge that right now we just haven't answered. Now, lunar development might provide the answers to that question, but first we got to do the lunar development. So, that iterative process might slow us down a bit.
Absolutely. Well, Justin, I know we covered a lot of topics, but is there anything that you want to talk about that we didn't get to?
I mean, I could talk all day about, how we get the rockets up there and, what the advantages are. But no, I'll just say that I'm excited. I'm definitely hopeful, ultimately realistic. But I do think that we have the interest, the financial capacity, and the excitement that's required to take big, risky steps, which is what the moon is. So I'm definitely hopeful for the future. I can't wait to see how it ends.
Well, thank you so much, Justin. It was great getting to talk to you, and I hope you have a wonderful class.
All right. You have a good day, Mr. Price.
Bye-bye.